Right, I'm a big fan of having better cooling, at least most of the time. If I go to a company and they're doing creep feed grinding, I say, guys, you really got to have good cooling. We got to get that coolant velocity close to the wheel velocity. We've got to have good aim. If they're doing cylindrical OD grinding and they have poor cooling, I typically say, don't worry about it. It's probably not causing you too much trouble. The exception would be if they have major loading issues. Then in that case, they want better cooling to reduce the loading. But in terms of removing heat from the workpiece, they're just not going to get much benefit. So quite often I'll say, it's not even worth messing with. And one of the main reasons of that is because of hydroplaning. This is true for cylindrical OD grinding. It's very true for cylindrical ID grinding, where we've got that spindle sticking way the heck out there, so we have a lot of potential for deflection. So hydroplaning is becoming bigger and bigger of an issue as companies are trying to hold tighter and tighter tolerances. So let's take a look at what hydroplaning is. And why don't we look at it just in basic surface grinding, although the concept's pretty much the same for cylindrical grinding, cylindrical ID, cylindrical OD, pretty much anything. So when we do cylindrical grinding, we apply coolant. Coolant gets in, some of it gets into the hot spot, and we have several forces. Now, force number one is just the force pushing up on our wheel, or if you want to look at it another way, the force pushing down on our workpiece causes deflection, and if you have deflection, it's going to be harder to hold size. But on top of that, as that coolant goes in, you've got two other forces. You could call it a single force, you can break it into two forces. Stephen Malkin, the world grinding guru who passed away recently, divided into two forces. He had it as the impingement force, the force as the coolant is squeezed into that grinding zone. And then he had the other one is the hydrodynamic force, just the force pushing off as that layer of coolant, oil, and water wets the tips of the grits and pushes back onto the wheel or onto the workpiece. And so between the grinding force, the hydrodynamic force, and the impingement force, the hydrodynamic force and the impingement force can actually be bigger than the grinding forces. And when we go to spark out, they're definitely bigger than the grinding forces. And these forces pushing up on this guy can be 20 pounds, 10 kilograms of force, 40 pounds sometimes, 20 kilograms of force. Really, really big, and that can cause big issues with trying to hold size. So there are a couple ways to deal with this. Number one, you can just live with it and grind to size and actually grind under size, realize you're going to get some deflection. Another possibility is when you go to spark out, let's say in cylindrical grinding, when you start to spark out, let's throttle back that coolant. Don't cut it off all at once, because then the wheel's going to crash into the workpiece. But throttle it back gradually as you're going to finishing and then to spark out, so that it's just a trickle. We're not going to get as good a coolant benefit. We're not going to get as good a lubrication benefit, but that's okay. We can live with that. What that'll do is it'll lower those two forces. That force is already going down during spark out, and then it's much easier to hold size. Some machines can do this already. Some machines are programmable for different pressures, for different portions of the cycle, roughing, semi-finishing, finishing, micro-finishing, spark out, whatever you want to call it. Some can't. Some can be retrofitted with such a thing. Different options for different machines, but this is one way to help yourself hold those tighter tolerances as they do get tighter and tighter, especially in ID grinding where you've got that spindle that's very susceptible to deflection.